Welcome to the O'Neill Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy, where we break down the latest in politics, dive deep into forces shaping our society, and uncover the policies that will make it all happen. Your host, Curtis O'Neill, is here to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we explore the world of politics with clarity and insight. Whether you're a political junkie or just trying to be informed, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the O'Neill Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy, where we dig beneath the surface and tackle the hard truths others are afraid to confront. Now, I'm your host, Curtis O'Neill, and today we're going to go ahead and dive headfirst into a national crisis that's unfortunately too often whispered about, but rarely addressed with the urgency it definitely deserves. In today's episode, titled The Mental Health Crisis in America When Rights Become Roadblocks. Yes, I said it, when rights become roadblocks. So, let me start with the question. How many more Jordans? How many more Codys? And how many more school shootings, subway tragedies, or families ripped apart will it take before we finally admit that our mental health system is broken? And no, we're not talking about someone feeling down because their girlfriend left them or someone bullied somebody online. No, today we're talking about serious mental illness, better known in the mental behavioral health area as SMI, the real stuff. We're talking about schizophrenia, bipolar disorder with psychotic features, some known as schizoaffective disorder, untreated paranoia, delusions, and of course, all those things that go along with it, like hallucinations. You know, people screaming at streetlights, punching strangers, or hearing voices that tell them to kill somebody. And the law. Now, the law says they have a right to refuse treatment, even when it's clearly that they may be a danger to themselves or to all of us. Now, you heard me say earlier on, I mentioned, how many more Jordans, and I'm talking about Jordan Neely. You all probably remember Jordan, of course, was a young man that dressed up like Michael Jackson, and he would dance in the subway. He was battling schizophrenia, yelling, of course, visibly disturbed, but his life ended tragically when Daniel Penny, a Marine, restrained him. And of course, Jordan or nobody else deserves to die like that. But he was sick. And, the big question outside of the whole Daniel Penny controversy, that's not what we're talking about. But the big question is, where was the system? And why hadn't he received care before the train ride? And then, of course, we know, I mentioned Cody. I'm talking about Cody Blasmer. Just recently he lit up the news when he attempted to firebomb Pennsylvania Governor's Josh Shapiro's house. He is another deeply disturbed individual. And it was reported that prior to attempting to firebomb the governor's house, he was eating batteries. Yes, folks, eating batteries. And his family reached out to mental health services numerous times and were told that there was nothing they could do. And of course, his mental illness was ignored until it made headlines. And then there was the horrific case of two 12-year-old girls who tried to kill their classmate in attempts to appease Slender Man. a fictitious horror character. And of course, as you probably guessed, one of the girls was later diagnosed with early onset schizophrenia. And then there's that 17-year-old that just recently made the news in Virginia who murdered both his parents and was living in the house with both his parents, who were so badly decomposed that they needed to identify him through dental records. The signs were there, but where was the intervention? It was nowhere to be found. And these aren't isolated events. We've had more than 600 mass shootings every year for the past few years in this country. And according to Treatment Advocacy, the Treatment Advocacy Center, serious mental illness affects nearly 1 in 20 U.S. adults. Now that's over 14 million Americans. 14 million people. That's somebody's uncle, somebody's brother, somebody's mother, somebody's father, somebody's cousin, somebody's boyfriend, son or daughter. But guess what? An estimated 40% of those with SMI receive no treatment. No treatment at all. And why? Because the law makes it doggone near impossible for families to step in and get their loved ones the help that they need, except if they commit a crime. So I know a little bit about this. And again, family listeners, you all know my background. Been in corrections for years. But I also know it from a personal standpoint also, is that I had a situation happen with a family member, close family member. And when we were going through that, we fought tooth and nail to get him some help for our loved one who was spiraling. Of course, all the signs, talking to themselves, going outside with no clothes on, playing in the streets. He was isolating himself. He was paranoid. But because he was over 18, we were told that they have a right to refuse treatment. And it was unfortunately, we had to watch helplessly, waiting for the call, praying that nothing would happen or nothing would come. And we were lucky enough that nothing did. And we were lucky enough that he had the spirit and the temperament and was obedient to go ahead and seek treatment and also become medication compliant. So we were one of the lucky ones, because now he is doing extremely well. And we are so thankful for that. Now that's our story. But however, thousands of families across the country are struggling to get their family members help. We need the laws to change. We need to allow families to be able to speak on their loved ones' behalf, because those individuals can't speak for themselves. And so it's so important that we do this, because guess what? When someone commits a crime, there's prison, right? And so let's talk about prisons, because right now, prisons are the biggest mental health providers in this country. I want you to let that sink in. Over 44% of jail inmates have a history of mental illness. Most go years, and I mean years, without a diagnosis or any psychiatric help until they're behind bars. I remember a story when I had a family visit the facility in which I worked in, and they were advised that their son was in the facility, and they were looking for him. They couldn't find him. They made calls to all numerous hospitals, jails, but had no idea that he was in prison. He committed a crime, was housed, later sentenced, and then was assigned a home facility. They ended up seeing his picture online, contacted the facility and arranged a visit. And they ended up saying, hey, we had no idea that he was here. We had no idea that he was sick. And they said, well, one day he just went outside with a robe on and house shoes. Now, mind you, it was 6 inches of snow outside and about 10 degrees. And they said after that, they didn't find him, didn't know where he was. They believed, like many believe, that someone put something in his drink, that someone had poisoned him and caused his with acid, some LSD or something like that, and caused his brain to fry. When the truth of the matter, the young man was in fact schizophrenic, with paranoid schizophrenic actually, and was receiving treatment in the facility. Now, he's not one of the few. That goes on, that happens with so many individuals that were not diagnosed and did not receive treatment in community. And then only then in a cell do they get treatment. And that's sad. We've criminalized almost mental illness. And then we scratch our heads when recidivism rates remain high, where tragedies keep piling up. Now look, I'm not calling for overreach. I'm not calling that just because someone may look like they have issues that we have the right to have a person committed. I'm not calling for that. And I'm not saying every person with a bad day needs to be medicated. No, I'm not. I am totally anti that. But when someone is actively hallucinating, they're hearing voices, they're screaming at invisible enemies. Now, we cannot just look away and say, well, that's their right. That's their right. We need assisted outpatient treatment programs. We need mental health courts. We need expanded involuntary commitment standards for those with a clear history of self-harm, violence, or even untreated psychosis. We need to remove the red tape, build more psychiatric beds, and fund community-based treatment centers. Not just throw cops at the problem. And that's part of the issue now. And yes, treatment works. For schizophrenia, antipsychotic medications like risperidone, clozapam can stabilize lives. For bipolar disorder, mood stabilizers and structured therapy can reduce manic episodes. And of course, for schizoaffective disorder, a combination of medication along with cognitive behavior therapy and life skills coaches can help individuals reintegrate back into society. But none of this happens if we don't first admit that we have a crisis. So to every policymaker listening, change the law. To every family going through it, don't give up. Keep going. Keep supporting. Keep calling. And to every voter wondering if this matters, it absolutely does. Because until we fix this mental health crisis in this country, we will continue to live in a nation that only helps its most vulnerable after it's too late. We have to stop becoming a society that is reactive rather than being proactive. Now, that's a lot. And I want you to think about that. And that's my perspective. So this has been the O'Neill Perspective. And again, I'm Curtis O'Neill, and I'm here to speak truth to power, advocate for change, and demand policy that makes sense. Let's stop the madness, people. Let's fix the problem, and let's try to fix the system. Until next time, I want you to keep pulling back the curtain, stay engaged, stay informed, and stay vigilant. Talk to you later.
That's all for today's episode of The O'Neill Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy. I hope you learned something new, got inspired, and maybe had a little fun along the way. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time for more thought-provoking conversations. Until then, stay informed and stay empowered.